What's up, Savvy Expats? My name is Julio, and today I'm going to give you the top 5 things to watch out for here in the Philippines as an expat. Alright, let's get straight to the point. Here's my first advice for you, Savvy Expats, which is be aware of scamming here in the Philippines. Scamming in the Philippines is something very prevalent here, and I'm sure some of you Savvy Expats are aware of it. It's a well-known dark side of the Philippines, with common styles of scamming, whether it being the infamous foreigner tax or the fun experience of being overcharged in a taxi. If you're talking about foreigner tax, it's essentially you being overcharged just because of your foreign looks. Most Filipinos tend to assume that foreigners are rich. So for example, you go to a low-class market where there are local stores, stands, and other types of shops. If you, being an expat, go there, they might overcharge you with, let's say, a nice shirt. They'll say that it's 500 pesos. Okay, that's over-exaggerating. It's usually around 350 pesos that they will overcharge you with it. When in reality, for a local Filipino, it's around 100 pesos, give or take. So, a tip I'll give you, Savvy Expats, is that if you're going to travel to areas outside of BGC, for example, where you're going to experience the real Philippines, I recommend you to bring a local contact with you, like a reliable friend. It doesn't necessarily have to be a local Filipino. It can be a person who has lived here for years or used to live here. Either way, it'll save you a lot of time and money. Talking about taxi overcharge, what I mean is that when you get on a taxi, the drivers, when they say that you're a foreigner as well, they'll avoid using the taximeter and instead giving you a fixed price. So for example, if they know that the price of the taximeter will be around 100 pesos, they'll try to bargain with you and instead giving you a fixed price of around 200 pesos, giving you excuses like sorry sir, traffic, or saying that gas prices are expensive. And if the driver does turn on the taximeter, they'll purposely go slower or taking a longer route so that the fare will be at a higher price. Another common scam in the Philippines is that there's way too many false beggars. False beggars is nothing new in this world. Frequently, you will encounter false beggars not only in the Philippines, but in most third world countries, even first world countries. These beggars are usually either working for their boss to pay off a loan, or they're just a lazy person with low dignity who doesn't want to work. Anyhow, we must remember that not all beggars are false. There are some who are actually in need, so we must be discerning when it comes to meeting beggars. As the Bible says, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. So I recommend you, Savvy Expats, this as well, to ask God for discernment when it comes to helping out or giving out a helping hand. It's always good to ask God for help. Now, heading on to my second advice for you, Savvy Expats, is to adapt to the Filipino culture. Let's start with something very prevalent in the Philippines, which is Filipino timing. Filipino timing in the Philippines is a well-known part of the Filipino culture here. It's essentially arriving at a later time than what was set for. So, when Filipinos make an appointment, let's say around 1 p.m., they'll either arrive around 1:30 or even 2 p.m. And basically, its direct meaning is to be late. Anyhow, if we compare it to other places like Japan, the US, some places in Europe, or any highly developed countries, people always arrive on time or almost on time depending on their situation. Filipino timing isn't always the case though. It really depends on the person you're meeting up with. I remember one time I had to go to the hospital because I had an appointment at around 9 a.m. I arrived slightly late, around 50 minutes late, and I was super anxious because I thought the doctor was going to cancel the appointment. But as it turns out, the doctor I was going to talk to was even more late than I was. For me, it was a relief, but then I had to wait a while, of course. Now, Savvy Expats, I'm telling you this so that you guys can have an idea of how Filipino timing works here. So I recommend for you to be open-minded or patient when it comes to you making appointments or events here. Not everyone's going to arrive on time. Another thing about Filipino culture for you all to know is to be aware about how modesty works here in the Philippines. Modesty in the Philippines is something that I know some of you may be aware of. It's an Asian country after all. Let's acknowledge the fact that the Philippines is very conservative. People are usually quiet, gentle, dressed up very conservatively, and very respectful. In Western parts of the world, people tend to be loud, dress up promiscuously, and be a bit rough in their actions. So when they move to the Philippines, it's a culture shock for them to see how peaceful Filipinos are here. I, for example, had a lot of trouble adapting to that culture when I first moved here to the Philippines. I'm from Venezuela, and people from Venezuela tend to be very loud and touchy when it comes to sharing and communicating with others. It's normal over there in Venezuela, and I'm pretty sure that in the US it's like that as well. But the Philippines, on the other hand, doesn't take it as normal. So that led me into being rejected by many people here, having a lot of strange looks, and overall having a bad time here. As a young guy, people considered me as an immature idiot, which I was at first, but as I learned how to behave like a Filipino, everything changed. But enough blabbering. What I mean to say is, try to observe and adapt to the personal lifestyle here in the Philippines. One last topic I could talk to you, Savvy Expat, isn't necessarily part of a Filipino culture here, but it's such a common problem nowadays that I might as well add it in here, and that is the colonial mentality. As I mentioned in my other videos before, colonial mentality is essentially the fact that Filipinos feel inferior to foreigners like you and I. I'm not saying that all Filipinos are like this. There's some Filipinos that don't care where you're from, but it's most likely that you'll stumble upon those who struggle with this problem. Filipinos tend to generalize that foreigners are people who are made of money, and they tend to do some actions like taking advantage of who you are, which leads me to my next point, which is being taken advantage of. Being taken advantage of in the Philippines is actually quite common, especially if you're taking into account that Filipinos tend to think that foreigners are rich. I can tell you guys that I've been a big victim of that. And as the word of God says, wealth makes many friends, but poverty drives them all away. I have made a lot of contacts here in the Philippines in the past, and it's insane the methods Filipinos use to take advantage of you. I'm not going to share the tactics that they use on me, but for most people, they tend to manipulate you into thinking that their family is in desperate need, or that they'll try to use lust as a method to get your attention, or they'll just guilt trip you into giving them money. Either way, it's nothing new to hear about these things in the Philippines. Being taken advantage of can relate to the topics I talked about earlier, like taxi drivers overcharging and foreigner tax. The Philippines has this grave problem that Filipinos take advantage of foreigners in some cases. And needless to say, this is a problem we've seen countless expats encounter when first moving here to the Philippines. They don't know what places to avoid, how to get around, who to trust, thus causing them to get burned. Seeing this problem, Evan and I wanted to find a way to spare you, as a loyal viewer of the channel, from these all too common issues. So, what did we do about this? Well, overcoming all these problems, where to start, who to trust, and what to avoid is covered in an all-in-one guide of Bonifacio Global City, linked down below. In the guide, you can learn the ropes of moving to the Philippines and even narrow down your decision process of where to move to. If you're interested, feel free to check it out, as I believe it can provide tons of value other than just moving into this one-of-a-kind city. See you there! Now, heading on to the next topic, which is victim of bribery. As I said in my other video of things that I dislike about the Philippines, bribery is a common nuisance for people who live here. Evan and I have actually experienced this nuisance. Let me tell you more about it. We were coming back home from a trip from Clark, Pampanga, and our friend was behind the wheel driving. When we were nearby our homes, our friend made a slight mistake in traffic laws, which he quickly fixed. The mistake was that he was in the wrong lane, but then switched fast to the right lane, about 100 meters before the stoplight. But it was already too late, as there were already police ahead of us, which they obviously saw us. So they stopped us and then began to make a huge deal out of that slight mistake, blaming us that we changed lanes too late and all of that. The fine for that mistake is a 2,000 pesos fine, plus that they were going to take away my friend's driver's license. We begged the police officers to let us go, but they weren't obliged. Instead, they gave us a second option, which was bribing them 1,000 pesos. Of course, we had to take that one because it was the easy way out. Anyways, these sorts of problems happen frequently, as I've heard a lot of stories from friends and a lot of people around. I hope certain acts like these soon get solved, with the Philippine government starting to take action with these lawless acts. But anyways, A recommendation I could give you, fellow expats, is to use Grab as a form of transportation. It's affordable, easy, and convenient to use. Plus, you can avoid problems like having to bribe the officers, because it's most likely that your Grab driver will know his ways around and obey the traffic laws with ease. Now, savvy expats, for my last advice is to avoid dollar mentality in the Philippines. Alright, everyone has spoke about the dollar mentality in his other videos before, and I'm going to pitch in this as well. The dollar mentality is strictly something that I advise you, expats, to avoid, because it can lead you into financial distress. Let me explain further. The dollar mentality is essentially the actions most foreigners do here when they first move here to the Philippines, and it's a trap that they all fall into. They believe that the exchange rate of dollars into pesos can sustain the spendings. But as a matter of fact, it doesn't. Why? Because of this one mistake. And I'm actually guilty of this as well. And it's that people visualizes the Philippines as a super cheap country. That with the dollars to pesos exchange rate, they are now practically millionaires who can spend frivolous amounts of money. But little do they realize, although the Philippines is cheap, it's not inexpensive to the point where they can spend carelessly. And this is a trap that many foreigners fall into, thinking that they can come to this country with a high exchange rate of 56 pesos to the dollar. They go crazy with their spending habits. Like, for example, this is so cheap, that is so cheap, buy this, buy that, and well, many other things. And this is what I want for you savvy expats to avoid. I encourage you savvy expats to get a feel for the average costs of goods and services in the Philippines according to local standards. Because you can really be saving so much money by having that mindset of, if that local is paying 50 pesos for that, I should be too. Instead of thinking, I don't mind paying 100 pesos extra, it's just $2. But well, anyway, savvy expats, you guys do you. Alright, savvy expats, you have reached the end of the video. I hope you guys enjoyed, and well, I'll see you on the next one. God bless.